So lithium is a rare earth mineral which is in high demand right now because of lithium-ion batteries. The thing with lithium, though, is that it's an extremely ecologically damaging mineral in terms of extraction. So usually it's extracted from rock mining. And for every ton of lithium that you extract, there's about 15 tons of CO2 that's produced. There's a new source that was discovered very recently. Basically, the idea is that within a lot of these underground rock formations, salt water gets heated up because it's underground, so the geothermal heat heats it up, and it rushes because of the heat through like the crevices in the ground and dissolves some of the lithium that's attached to the rocks. Because it's sort of naturally done, all you have to do is kind of extract the lithium from the water, which supposedly is a lot more ecologically friendly. So it's been termed green lithium. And the question to me, I've been thinking about this a lot, is like whether that framing works. Is it, does it work at all? Right? Because it gives me sort of these images of like the conversations around clean coal, which was never, it's almost an oxymoron. Like, how can coal be clean? And I'm just trying to figure out whether green lithium is kind of like that too, where rare earth minerals, can they actually even be green because they never really are part of the regenerative earth cycles that we have for nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, all organic cycles, right? These are clearly not organic minerals. So how do they get back to the environment? And so basically it's a question about like, what can we consider green moving into the future and whether green lithium is green at all?
It's a constraining frame to call something green right now, or that's what's coming up for me as you mentioned it. It is less damaging. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of green, we should have like the colors of mushrooms or something. So it's like a grayish brown movement. I don't want to say brown movement because that's like brown shirts are not good. But decomposing, because you were talking about like bringing minerals like back into the earth, but like a movement based on like decomposition instead of like photosynthesis, and like these kind of crypt keepers of the natural world that are like fungal roles. Yeah, we should be more like fungi than trees.
I feel like it's happening, yeah. In terms of the like aesthetics of these types of environmental movements, like there is a bit of an earthier color to it.
I mean, we live in like the industrial ruins, like, or a lot of people at least live in lots of like Southwest Ontario is like a big, or used to be a big industrial belt, and going from like Detroit to whatever, some of the places outside of Toronto where auto factories used to be lived in. It's like we are living among those ruins, and that's like unique historically. That never really happened that quickly.
I feel like we have such a weird relationship with decay in general. And a conversation is always framed in like a biological, like a matter, like the smell of it and the rot of it and everything. But I have found some freedom in like thinking about it in terms of like audio decay or like decay in terms of physics, just the rate at which something goes away. It's easier to engage it.
Like one of the things that came up when I was thinking about this is like, is the only thing that's actually green stuff that can fully go back and become a part of nature? And if that's the case, then is the only time that we're going to get to green technology when we get to wetware, where we're like basically working with like organics, and like the technologies that we use are made of like life forms or like lifelike forms, because we have like these natural cycles of regeneration with life forms. We don't have natural cycles for regeneration for any of the other forms of technology that we have, right?
Also, don't you think that dream, once it's realized, that the idea that it's more sustainable or anything, however you want to put it, is going to end up being total bullshit anyways? Like, why should we think that just because something's organic, it won't have far worse environmental consequences? Like, organic things have horrible effects on the environment all the time. Like, invasive species, locusts. Like, you think people are not going to create human? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. Like, we think green, and we think, if everything was just made out of like living material or whatever, but there's still going to be. Yeah. It's like living things create waste. Living things can grow in unsustainable ways. Living things do all of that.
There's lots of questions too around like, what is nature? Like, I would say nature is like a ceaselessly creative force that is constantly producing new things, and like we're part of that process. And yeah, like our chemical industries that created like thousands of new compounds that didn't exist as far as we know inside of the universe. But that's what life forms did. That's what like bacteria did. That's what like these living forces have altered the mineral composition of the earth itself. The diversity of minerals is itself like a product of life forms over billions and billions of years. I think the question is more that the cycles of the stuff that we create are not aligned to the cycles that we need to survive,
Just got a book, Radical Indigenism, and it's really good. It's totally out of the identity politics, and inside of like there's these beautiful schematics of these different cultures that do different kinds of technologies. And the one that's popping in my head is Northern India, these communities that are built in these kind of like watery swamp-like areas. And so to get between the two places, you need these bridges. So they have these huge trees, and there's a secondary root system on top of the trees. And part of like their cultural, spiritual practice is to like coax that root system to the other one across the water and create like a root bridge. And then they kind of build it up and whatever. But so it takes like a generation to build it, but they last like 250 years. So it's like this cadence of like, it takes a long time to make something resilient with nature to kind of work with it. And we have a really long history of, like trying to exploit. So green, I like the idea of green in relationship to a certain kind of cadence that will allow us to survive versus just organic.
I mean, maybe that's the conversation should be changed to one of tempo and like duration or something, cadence, as you put it, like rather than a color, which like as being the symbol of what's good and bad for the natural world. It's interesting. Yeah, the bridge is something Udit has showed us and that I know is inspired Udit in your thinking.
But that, again, that has to do with like how fast, I guess, like these very particular mineral arrangements are limiting creative potential in the sense that Val has talked about also. And like maybe it's like a matter of like, well, how do you like slow that down so that they can be reused in some other way, right? I don't know, I'm like still trying to figure out like how to think about time. Is it like accumulation? Is that what it is? Like your body, for example, if you accumulate too much alcohol in your bloodstream really quickly, then it doesn't align to the rate at which your body can kind of process it. But if you do it over time, you can. And so is that like the right kind of metaphor to think about how fast like the systems that we have, whether they're earthly, natural, or like human recycling or whatever, regeneration, can like process the accumulation that happens over time?
You can also frame it in terms of how much time went into the things that are being consumed, not just how much goes out into the stuff that you produce that'll be left over afterwards, but like the carbon cycle and our disruption of the carbon cycle is like a problem of timing, where we basically in 200 years unleashed 3.7 million years worth of compression of a carbon cycle, right?
Yeah.
Like it's literally what we did. So there's like timing on both sides to be thought of, the inputs and the outputs.
Suppose we had like a mechanism to take the cobalt out of its current, or lithium out of its current, like waste, like e-waste or whatever, and put it back into some place, some part of the earth, which was like productive in some way again. Would that be considered green? Or would that be considered sort of more naturally aligned to what we want?
I just don't think we know enough about the impact, because maybe taking it out is not just like a one in, one out type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like understanding that mineral system in an intimate way, just as the indigenous communities understood the root systems, of course.
Because risk came up before, the relationship between slowness generally and de-risking is an interesting one. And it seems, I mean, I'm just thinking about this, but generally true that, not necessarily about everything. If you slowly drive over a cliff, you're over the cliff when you're over but driving slower would be a thing. But in general, like drinking the alcohol slower, all these things, you're able to kind of titrate and sort of gauge a little bit better as well, and have time to sort of say like, okay, it's having this impact. We often, or capitalist markets often kind of go all in on something very quickly, rather than seeing like what the effect is. Like we test things to see if consumers are going to like it. I don't know that we always test, over sort of generations to see what the environmental consequences of everybody having, 15 phones over the course of a lifetime is going to be. And it's just like, maybe we just didn't need to have phones so quickly, We could know a little more about what the effect of mining would be. But it's a very different pace to move at than what we're all used to over the past years of our lives and sort of the previous, 150, 200 years. Signal or noise? All this?
I think it's a signal of Udit edging closer and closer to Jainism. Ethical movement that thinks it's like wrong to even move a stone because it disrupts the earth. So
that's great. I love it.
You'll take it. Michael, signal or noise?
I'm not sure about the particular signal because I don't know enough about the cobalt piece, but I think the subsequent conversation about like how do we name like something that's sustainable? Like I don't know the answer to that. I haven't thought of that in a long time. So I would say it's that it evoked that conversation. It's a strong signal that we need to figure that out.
Yeah, I love the idea of the just questioning. Are we thinking about the environment through entirely wrong lenses, and do we have the right frameworks at all? And what work can be done to develop new ones. And, to your point about radical indigenism, like which ones can be learned from that exist. And there's probably a lot that are basically gone, that just knowledge that does not exist anymore.
Sorry, just in general, it's like any word that's been around for 10 years with political movements attached to it probably needs to be reassessed in its meaning. That's how I'm feeling about green right now.
Yeah, the word green has usually been used to like entrench like the status quo, right? Whether it's green capitalism or green coal or whatever it is, which is like the reason why I'm like interested in thinking about new ways of talking about it.
Macy, what do you think?
I think it's just a signal that we need to embrace decay more. Ferment decay and different colors for the earth.
Personal and social decay. We got to embrace it.
Broadcast from later.